Hey there and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug video. And recently we saw the conclusion of the 4th season of Miraculous with the episode Strike Back, which was the second half of the finale, Shadowmoth's final attack. And this episode largely changed up the status quo of the show in a much needed way. For starters, it really was the end of Shadowmoth, because in the closing moments of the episode, he gives away the Peacock Miraculous to his scheming nephew, Felix. And speaking of Felix, he really came out of Season 4 looking like an absolute stallion. Seriously, he is the proof that less is more. You don't need to appear all that often to make a big splash, but when the character does appear, they need to make an impact, because that helps build up the mystique. And from now on, when Felix does appear, the audience knows to expect some big plot-heavy shenanigans that will move the story forward in interesting ways. But anyway, let's not stray too far off topic, because we know that there was one more big twist in that episode. One more huge story point that set up a huge arc for our heroes during Season 5. Felix, using the Dog Miraculous, was able to help Gabe steal literally every single Miraculous in the Zodiac box except for the cat and the Ladybug, obviously. So this left us with a cliffhanger ending where, I guess it's just Hawkmoth again for now, calls out Ladybug and Cat Noir and taunts them openly in front of the people of Paris, telling them how he's going to defeat them now that he has all the Miraculouses. So obviously based on this, our heroes are going to need to collect themselves some more Miraculouses during Season 5. But the question remains, how is that storyline going to play out? What are the specific details? How's it going to work? And so today, that's what I'm interested in puzzling out. How is this storyline going to be handled during Season 5? What is the episode structure going to look like? Is this going to be a season-wide plot? Or is it going to be a worst-case scenario and get resolved in a handful of episodes at the very start of the season? Honestly, that would just be awful, wouldn't it? So, let's all hope for option 1. But what would that option even look like? How would it work? How will the story flow? And well, realistically, if he actually wants to win, he would use multiple Miraculouses at once and absolutely clap the two main heroes and steal their Miraculouses. And since nobody can even access the time travel Miraculouses to try and reverse things to save the day, that means it's game over. But there's no need to worry about that potential plot point, because old mate Gabe, despite improving his intelligence this season and actually coming up with some genuinely good plans, is going to be forced by the writers to act like a complete idiot so that he doesn't just instantly win as soon as he uses any Miraculous. Like seriously, there are just so many ways for him to win, it's insane. He could use the rabbit to time travel and follow Ladybug to where she detransforms and then ambush her. He could use the fox to make himself invisible and follow her to where she detransforms and ambush her. He could use the mouse to make hundreds of tiny Hawkmoths to follow the heroes to where they detransform and ambush them. I'm sure the snake would be useful. Can the rooster not invent powers? I'm sure there's a lot of different powers that would help him figure out the identities. I mean, at a certain point, it would be a little ridiculous that he probably won't actually use any of these Miraculouses the way that he should, and is just going to revert to akumatizing people and then helping the villain using one of the Miraculouses, or handing out Miraculouses to his villain crew. But on the other hand, if we went like this, the show would end in episode 1, so we'll have to suspend the disbelief a little bit here. So anyway, that was my original introduction for this video, and I guess I will keep it intact because I think it still does work. But imagine, after writing and recording this whole thing, the episode title's released, and they threw my whole script into turmoil. So anyway, I am going to keep what I wrote, and then at the end, I'm going to walk through the episode titles and talk about what they could mean. So yeah, first up though, we'll have how I thought it should go from before I knew the titles. And then we'll see how it all matches up. But anyway, first up, knowing Gabe is a bit of an idiot, I can see him giving out 2 Miraculouses to his little villain squad. But which ones? Well, Natalie is still dying and he gave hers away already, so she is a doubtful inclusion. But luckily, we still have 2 villain characters who have recently teamed up together, and who both hate the heroes, have ties to Gabe, and are both associated with a specific Miraculous, Lila with the fox, and Chloe with the bee. And honestly, I cannot envision a world in which the writers are able to resist giving them a Miraculous each for them to go nuts with and cause some mayhem. After all, This gives a little bit of variety to the show, as opposed to Gabe just using each Miraculous one by one across the different episodes. And it really does tie up their character arcs nicely. It gives us one last hurrah for Chloe, because they did set her up in the villain team and penalty team, so they may as well give that a bit of a payoff. And perhaps sets Lila up for more of a spotlight going forward into Season 5 and beyond. After all, they do seem to want her to feel like a big villain, but they've hardly given her any spotlight or time to shine whatsoever. I really think Season 5 is where they can shift gears with her character and give her a Felix-style makeover. I mean, Season 4 was his season, even though he appeared in 3 episodes? He stole the show. So I don't think there's a good reason for Lila not to get that same opportunity for character growth and development. They have a chance in Season 5 to really redeem the poorer areas of the writing. They have Felix looking awesome already, and Gabe looking competent for the first time in his life. They seem to be wanting to push Chloe as a villain, again. And I mean, that's pretty meh, but I can look past it. So why not give Lila the same spotlight? Make her seem like a legit threat, instead of a cringe side villain who's very two-dimensional and has no development at all. So realistically, I think that Gabe gives out the fox and the bee, and over the course of the season, Ladybug and Cat Noir are going to defeat those two characters and take back the Miraculouses from them. One, I would guess, is going to happen early to mid-season, and realistically that's going to be Chloe, as she is very oversaturated, and it's time for her to go home. And so then they can leave Lila in the mix for, I don't know, the last third of the season and get it back just before the finale. I think getting the fox should be one of the last things that happens, because Season 4 has seen Ladybug depend on Alia as a partner. So here, I think it's better to let her partnership with Cat Noir develop and grow on its own, whilst also keeping true to what was said in the Season 4 finale, that Alia doesn't need to be a superhero to be Marinette's friend and confidant. But this does bring me back to how Ladybug and Cat Noir are going to get back the Miraculouses, and some of the details surrounding that. And like I said earlier, they are simply going to beat fools down and take the Miraculouses back one by one. I don't see there being much nuance here. And I mean, Gabe holding onto them all until the end and just not using them and not winning somehow is going to make him look truly pathetic. So I think the best way to do it is to chip away at his collection as the season progresses. He still looks like a dweeb, but less so. But what should the order be? And this is a big call, but I think it needs to be none of the ones that have a permanent user first up. It needs to be one that's remained unclaimed, or at least unclaimed in the present. So of course I'm referring to the rabbit. Now there are a couple of narrative reasons as to why I think this one needs to be first. The first is that line that Bunnock said once, that Ladybug calls her in when it's a last resort type of deal. Well, this kind of feels like a last resort type of deal to me. It really can't get too much worse for the hero team outside of them losing the last jewels and the world ending. I mean, it just feels like the right time. And then on top of that, the rabbit is also just too OP for this sort of world. Gabe can't have it for too long. After all, Gabe can just sit back and try to track where Ladybug and Cat Noir are going to de-transform. And we also learned in the most recent episode that time travel is considered dangerous and treacherous. It can lead to unforeseen consequences, at least in Ladybug's opinion. That's why she doesn't use it. But do you think that Gabe is going to give two shits about accidentally wiping people out of existence or changing the future? Because I don't. He wants to erase the world anyway. And side note, and I don't know if this is a plot hole, but if he really wanted to, couldn't he just go back in time and change the past and prevent Emily ever getting sick? I mean, he knows for a fact how to fix the peacock now. So if he goes and fixes it before she gets sick, whilst it would wipe out his timeline, I mean, I think, because Cat Blanc really wasn't clear about parallel timelines and all that, considering future Alex, in a different timeline, was getting wiped out by a completely different set of events. And no one had even meddled with time up to that point, so I don't really know how that worked, and I don't think the writers know either. It was just rule of cool. But let's move on. At least this way, if he changed time, he'd still get what he wants, a not dead wife. But of course, he won't do that. He'll make a billion more akumatized villains to get clapped by the heroes whilst he sobs into his hanky. But yeah, Bunny first, and then honestly, most of the others do not matter in terms of their order. I mean, a few filler after the bunny, and then you get the bee for the little mid-season showdown between the heroes and the villains, and then I would say more filler, and then finally the fox before the finale. And then you have the actual finale, where Gabe has his classic butterfly Miraculous for his final showdown with the heroes. And really, it should just be him and Ladybug and Cat Noir for the final fight. It started with them, it should end with them. I feel it would feel significantly cheapened if they had anybody else or injected other side heroes into the equation. They have their place, but it ain't in this battle. So that means at the end of the season, we should have the heroes with all the Miraculouses except the Peacock, because I don't feel like Felix is going to lose the Peacock just yet. I think they want him to hold on to it for future storylines if they go past season 5, which I'm pretty sure they are, aren't they? Anyway though, I actually think that they will get back the butterfly, and then realistically, they'll either have it stolen immediately, or maybe they can do some sort of time skip and then set up the events of the rise of the new Hawkmoth, as was referenced previously. I just feel like after those 5 seasons, jumping straight into more villain shenanigans would be a bit of overkill. A time skip's going to let them breathe a bit as characters and give time for the story to reset and for fresh storylines to form. Oh, and I also think that she's going to permanently give out the Miraculouses at the end, because realistically, always having them with her opens her up to having them all stolen at once by a future villain, again. And I mean, part of her story arc in season 4 was coming to realize that she doesn't have to carry all the world's burdens on her own. So I think it would tie into that arc quite nicely for her to show such trust in her allies and give them out like that. So, this is where my original predictions end. And now let's see how they line up. And just a bit of a disclaimer, I swear on my life I did write this before the episode titles released. If everything lines up, I'm promising you that I'm not full of shit. I'm not a liar. But yeah. Anyway, first title, Evolution, which means the rabbit. So yeah, just as I thought. They'll go with the big timey-wimey episode first. And next up is Multiplication. So yeah, a little filler one using another good Miraculous. Okay, on track so far. Then we have Destruction. So an Adrian-focused episode, I guess. Maybe some Lady Noir shenanigans. Some more child abuse from Gabe. Probably. I reckon this is going to be a big episode for that shipping war though. And then Jubilation. So Pig next. Hooray! But I'm on track so far. We've had the big one, and then we've had some filler. And then we come to Illusion. I kind of think I prefer my way, where the fox lasts right until the end. You could have Lila as the foil to the heroes all season, and actually give her character something to do. Oh well. Guess they want Rena back ASAP. Next up is Determination and Passion. Ox and Goat. And then Reunion. So I'm guessing this is where Ladybug hands out the Miraculouses again and we get our first group team up with some of the heroes? Probably. I would say that the focus is going to be on Rena and Ladybug for this one though, because theirs is probably the biggest reunion. And everyone else who has their Miraculouses back from Hawkmoth, well, they're not very big characters. We follow this up with Exaltation, so the tiger, and then a 2-parter, the Kwame's Choice. Part 1, Transmission, so butterfly. So that means a Gabe confrontation episode perhaps, which means big plot developments. And then part 2, Deflagration. And this one seems big. So Kwame's Choice, it's got to be Nuru here, right? He's the only Kwame that makes sense for the title of Transmission, considering that's his power. And then Deflagration, which means to heat a substance until it burns away rapidly. And I'm not really sure what this means in the context of the show, but honestly, it's probably just the Akumatou's character's power. Or their name. Something like that. I mean, most of the other titles are powers, so it makes sense that this would be too, or at least related to it. We then go Perfection, so dragon. Migration, which, I mean, that's the horse, right? I know it's technically the Kwame of teleportation or something like that, but I just feel like this title fits the power. And I'm pretty sure it's put like that in that Kwame book. Derision's next, and that's the monkey. And then there's Intuition, and that's the snake. Protection, so turtle. Adoration, the dog. Emotion, so the peacock. Which means Felix, which means more on the Sentimonster plot, right? I mean, whenever he turns up, the episode's usually really big, so this should be a good one. And then there's Pretension, the rooster. And then this is where it gets a little bit murky. Revelation, confrontation, collusion, revolution, representation. And then the last day, part 1 and 2, confirmation and recreation. And then the final title, Action. So I think all the Kwame powers have been used here, except the horse, which I had to use some word connection to give an episode to, and the bee. So what's the bee power? Subjection. So basically, oppression. How do you get rid of oppression? A revolution. So, maybe that's the episode. Although, according to the Kwame art book of dubious canonicity, considering Asterix crapped on it that one time and had no idea what they put in it, the B could also be action. But isn't that like the last episode? Ugh! Chloe, the true final boss?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Let's hope I'm right with my first guess. Revolution. Anyway, Revelation's next, and that's probably a reveal of some kind. Senti stuff, perhaps? The identities? Adrian finds Emily's body in the basement? Lots of possibilities that would in turn shape what the next episode, Confrontation, actually means. And of course, this would in turn shape which characters are having this confrontation. At this point, it could be anyone. Collusion's next, and that's a secret or illegal cooperation or conspiracy to deceive others. That smells like Lila. Lila and maybe the villain crew are heavily involved in this one. Representation? No idea. Filler maybe? Feels like a Penalteam style episode to cool off before the big arc, so maybe that's what it is. And then we have another two-parter, The Last Day, Confirmation and Recreation. So, Last Day probably refers to the world ending. It's the world's last day, when Gabe wipes the slate clean to bring back his wife. And I know I backflip on this topic all the time, of will they or won't they go with the rewrite of the entire world. I initially thought they would, and then Ephemeral put doubt in my head because it's so high stakes. But then the writers had Gabe snatch all the Miraculouses, which was pretty huge and unexpected. So now, I feel like they can't have him lose all the Miraculouses in Season 5, and then just look like a complete chump without accomplishing anything. It would be so pathetic. Plus, it's been building to this. They need to do it. So, as of the start of Season 5, I'm firmly in the camp again that it will happen. So that happens in Part 1. And then what really convinced me that he'll succeed in making the wish is the title of Part 2, Recreation. Ladybug has to recreate her world. But I can already hear you asking, but how did Ladybug retain her memories when the world's rewritten, smarty pants? Well, she loses the Ladybug. That has to happen. Otherwise, he couldn't have it. But perhaps she will have time to get back to the box. Or she's unified with the horse, so maybe she could portal back, dunno. Who cares? But strap into your tinfoil spaceship, kiddos, because we're going to the moon with a new theory. Right, so the Ox's power is resistance, yeah? It lets you resist any power. Any power. Technically, the wish is a power. A unified power, but it is a power nonetheless. It's two Miraculouses doing something, hence a power. So when Gabe rewrites the universe, everyone gets wiped out, wiped clean, and gets replaced by alternate versions of them. People that are the same, but also not the same. But if you use the Ox, could you potentially keep on existing whilst that happens to everybody else? So, theoretically, Marinette can still exist in Gabe's new world and then recreate her old one, because she wasn't affected. Plus, if you want to have a lot of fun with the ending, maybe she could even give Emily the Ox to keep her around when she reverts the world back, if you want to have a super happy ending. And I know, yeah, it's unlikely, but that doesn't make it impossible. Because yeah, I kind of want her around as an actual character. One, I want to see what she's actually like. And two, that means my secret evil Emily theory can still come true. And then, after that, we come to action. So either this is going to be a time skip episode setting up Season 6, or a lame Chloe epilogue. Oh, no! Or it's not actually going to be there at all in terms of its release, and it got muddled up. Dunno, I know that's probably unlikely, but let's just pray it's not a Chloe is the true evil mastermind type of thing, because if she's the final boss of all of this, I'm actually just gonna cry. But yeah, that's all I really got for today. And I will remind you that these have just been my opinions. And now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think the storyline's gonna look like in Season 5? Think it'll play out similar to what I said? Or do you think it's gonna go differently? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe and let me know.